Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Ethan Sawyer stood before the mirror in his park ranger uniform, meticulously adjusting his tie. At 52, his hair had begun to gray at the temples, but his eyes still held the sharp glint of a man who had spent decades observing the subtleties of nature. Outside his window, the Old Faithful Inn loomed, its rustic wooden facade a testament to the enduring spirit of Yellowstone National Park. He glanced at his watch. 2 hours until the anniversary dinner. 2 hours until he set in motion the collapse of 26 years of marriage. The dinner preparations had been meticulous, each detail carefully chosen to reflect both his dedication to his marriage and his unwavering commitment to the park. The Old Faithful Inn was not just a restaurant, it was a symbol, a representation of the intertwining of his personal and professional lives. As the first guests began to arrive, Ethan greeted them at the door, his ranger's smile firmly in place. Their eldest daughter, Lily, a biologist, was the first to enter. Her keen eyes took in every detail of her father's composed demeanor. "Dad," she said, embracing him tightly. "You look great." Ethan returned the hug, wondering if she could feel the tension in his shoulders. "Thanks, sweetheart. You were looking sharp yourself." As more guests filtered in, friends, colleagues, their other 2 adult children, Ethan maintained his warm facade. He was particularly attentive to Vanessa, his wife of 26 years and a wildlife photographer. She seemed distracted, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "Everything okay, darling?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with concern that only he knew was fabricated. Vanessa startled slightly. "Oh, yes, just thinking about that new wildlife series I am planning." Ethan nodded, knowing full well that wildlife was not the only thing on her mind. He had seen the furtive glances she had been exchanging with Jack Hawthorne, his supposed best friend and the park's head of security. As the main course was served, Ethan stood, raising his glass. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "First, I want to thank you all for coming tonight," Ethan began, his voice steady. 26 years ago, I made the best decision of my life when I married Vanessa. She has been my partner, my confidant, and my inspiration through all these years. He paused, his eyes scanning the room. Vanessa smiled weakly while Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Now," Ethan continued, a glint in his eye, "would anyone like some wine?" A chuckle rippled through the room at his typical dry humor. Vanessa, barely paying attention, mumbled, "No, dear, I am trying to lose a few pounds." Ethan's smile did not waver as he pressed on. "Or is it because you were taking antibiotics for that dangerous illness you caught on your last photography expedition in the backcountry?" The room fell silent. Vanessa's face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock and fear. Jack's hand froze midway to his wine glass. Before anyone could react, Lily stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "Dad," she said, her voice quavering, "there is something else you need to know." All eyes turned to Lily, who stood trembling, her gaze fixed on her father. "Mom's affair, it is not with a stranger." Ethan's eyebrows rose in feigned surprise. "Oh." Lily took a deep breath. "It is with Jack." The room erupted into gasps and murmurs. Jack attempted to stand, his face a mask of guilt and panic. "Now, hold on a minute. Do not," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "Do not insult us all by trying to deny it." He turned to the stunned guests. "I apologize for the dramatics, but I believe it is time for everyone except Vanessa and Jack to leave. We have some private matters to discuss." As the room cleared, the tension thickened, becoming almost palpable. Vanessa sat frozen in her chair while Jack paced nervously by the window. Once they were alone, Ethan's calm demeanor cracked slightly. His eyes, usually warm and inviting, now held a cold fury that made both Vanessa and Jack flinch. "How long?" Ethan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Vanessa opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Jack stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Ethan, buddy, we never meant for this to happen. It just, how long?" Ethan repeated, each word sharp enough to cut. Vanessa finally found her voice. 6 months, she whispered. Ethan nodded slowly, as if processing this information. Then, without warning, he burst into laughter. It was a harsh, bitter sound that echoed off the wooden walls of the inn. 6 months, he repeated, shaking his head. "Well, I have got news for you both. I have known for 4 of those months." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a stack of photographs. As he spread them across the table, Vanessa and Jack's faces paled further. The images showed them in various compromising positions, all clearly taken within the park's boundaries. "You see," Ethan continued, his voice now eerily calm. Those cameras I set up to track wolf movements, they caught a lot more than wolves. Vanessa broke down, tears streaming down her face. Ethan, please. I am so sorry. It is just, you were always so distant, so caught up in your work. Jack was there. He listened. Do not, Ethan cut her off. Do not you dare try to justify this. You could have talked to me, told me you were unhappy. Instead, you chose to betray me with my best friend. He turned to Jack, his eyes blazing. And you. I trusted you. We have been friends for over 2 decades, and this is how you repay the friendship. Jack's shoulders slumped. I never meant for it to go this far, Ethan. It just happened. Ethan laughed again, a hollow sound devoid of any humor. Things like this do not just happen, Jack. There are choices you both made over and over again. He reached into his jacket once more, pulling out a thick envelope. I have made my choice too. As he slid the envelope across the table, Vanessa's eyes widened in recognition. Divorce papers. Ethan, please, she pleaded. Can we talk about this? We are talking now, Ethan replied coldly. And I am done listening to lies. Ethan stood, his ranger training allowing him to maintain a calm exterior despite the emotional turmoil within. I'm going to make this very clear, he said, his voice low and controlled. I intend to expose your betrayal, not just to our families but to the entire park community. Jack paled, realizing the implications for his career and reputation. Ethan, you cannot be serious. Think about what this would do to us, to the park. I have thought about it, Ethan cut him off. I have thought about nothing else for months. And I have decided that the park deserves to know the truth about its head of security. Vanessa reached out, her hand trembling. Please, Ethan, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, take some time. No, Ethan said firmly. There is no working this out. You have made your choices, and now you will face the consequences. As Vanessa and Jack pleaded for discretion, Ethan's calm exterior finally cracked. In a controlled but emotion-filled voice, he expressed the deep hurt and anger boiling inside him. Do you have any idea what you have done? Not just to me, but to everything I stand for? I have dedicated my life to this park, to protecting it. And you too. You have turned it into your personal playground for your affair. He turned to Vanessa, his voice softening slightly. I loved you, Vanessa. God help me, I still do. But this, I cannot forgive. To Jack, his tone hardened once more. And you, I trusted you with my friendship, with the security of this park. You betrayed both. Ethan gathered the photographs, tucking them back into his jacket. I will give you both some time to think about your options. But know this, one way or another, there will be consequences for your actions. As he turned to leave, Vanessa called out, her voice broken. Ethan, please. What about the children? Ethan paused at the door, his hand on the knob. Without turning back, he replied, they deserve to know the truth, all of it. With that, he walked out, leaving Vanessa and Jack to face the wreckage of their choices. The weight of the past months, the pain of betrayal and the uncertainty of the future crashed over Ethan like a tidal wave. For a fleeting moment, he considered turning back, telling them it was all a terrible mistake, that they could find a way to fix things. But then he remembered the images captured by those hidden cameras, the whispered conversations he had overheard, the lies told to his face day after day. No, there was no going back. The only way was forward, into the wilderness of an unknown future. Taking a deep breath, Ethan straightened his shoulders and walked away from the dining room. He had a new mission now, to protect the park he loved from the very people he had once trusted most. And like every mission he had undertaken in his long career as a ranger, he intended to see it through to the end. As he stepped out into the cool night air, the distant rumble of Old Faithful erupting reached his ears, a reminder of the enduring power of nature, of the things that remained constant even as the world around them changed. Ethan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He may have lost his marriage, his best friend, and his trust in those closest to him, but he still had Yellowstone. And for now, that would have to be enough. Ethan Sawyer stood at the trailhead, his weathered hands gripping a well-worn map of Yellowstone. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, where a group of influential park donors milled about, sipping coffee from biodegradable cups and chatting excitedly about the day's hike. All right, folks, Ethan called out, his voice carrying the easy authority of a veteran ranger. We've got a beautiful day ahead of us. This trail will take us through some of Yellowstone's most pristine backcountry. Remember, we are here to observe, not disturb. As the group set off, Ethan's mind raced beneath his calm exterior. Every step of this hike had been meticulously planned, right down to the unexpected detour he would suggest later. The route would take them perilously close to one of Jack's hidden caches of rare plants and animal products. 3 hours into the hike, Ethan paused, furrowing his brow in mock confusion. "That is odd," he muttered just loud enough for the nearest donors to hear. "What is it, Ranger Sire?" asked Margaret Hawley, a silver-haired philanthropist known for her generous contributions to the park's conservation efforts. Ethan pointed to a barely visible game trail branching off from the main path. "I do not remember that being there. Mind if we take a quick detour? I want to make sure everything is as it should be." The group murmured their assent, eager for an added touch of adventure. Ethan led them down the narrow trail, his heart pounding with anticipation. After about 100 yards, he stopped abruptly, holding up a hand to halt the group. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said gravely, "I am afraid we have stumbled upon something troubling." Before them lay a small clearing, partially obscured by dense underbrush. Even from this distance, the unnatural bulges beneath a camouflage tarp were clearly visible. Ethan approached cautiously, lifting one corner of the tarp to reveal stacks of crates and plastic containers. Margaret gasped. "Good Lord, what is all this?" Ethan's face was a mask of concern as he examined the cache. "It appears to be some sort of smuggling operation, rare plants, animal parts." "This is deeply disturbing." The donors crowded around, their expressions a mix of shock and outrage. Ethan allowed them a moment to take in the scene before speaking again. "I hate to cut our hike short, but I need to report this immediately. We will head back to the visitor center, and I will contact park security." As they hurried back down the trail, Ethan could hear the donors whispering furiously among themselves. Seeds of doubt had been planted. Now it was time to water them. Back at the visitor center, Ethan made a show of reporting the discovery to park administration. He watched with carefully concealed satisfaction as the news spread like wildfire through the park staff and volunteers. That evening, in the privacy of his small cabin, Ethan pinned an anonymous tip to the park's administration. The letter detailed concerns about potential illegal activities within Yellowstone, hinting at possible involvement from someone high up in the park's hierarchy. He was careful not to name Jack directly, but included enough details to point the investigation in the right direction. As he sealed the envelope, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. The first moves had been made. Now it was time to position himself for the next phase of his plan. The following week, Ethan volunteered to assist with the internal investigation triggered by his anonymous tip. His years of service and sterling reputation made him an obvious choice, and no one questioned his motives. During a meeting with the investigative team, Ethan casually mentioned some inconsistencies he had noticed in recent security reports. "It is probably nothing," he said with a shrug, "but I have been noticing some odd patterns in the patrol routes lately. Might be worth looking into." The lead investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Diana Chun, latched onto the information. "Can you elaborate, Ranger Sire?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, the picture of casual concern. "Well, there seem to be some gaps in coverage, particularly in the more remote areas of the park, and the timing of some patrols seems off. Like I said, it is probably nothing, but in light of recent events, I thought it was worth mentioning." As the meeting continued, Ethan could see the gears turning in Diana's head. He had successfully planted another seed of doubt, this time, directly implicating the park security protocols and, by extension, Jack Hawthorne. Over the next few weeks, Ethan continued his campaign of subtle sabotage. He engaged in hushed conversations with fellow rangers, expressing concern over the effectiveness of current patrol routes. He asked pointed questions during staff meetings, always maintaining a facade of professional curiosity. Then came the masterstroke. Using his network of hidden cameras, Ethan captured footage of Jack entering restricted areas of the park during odd hours. The grainy nighttime images showed a figure that was unmistakably Jack, moving furtively through areas that should have been off-limits, even to the head of security. Ethan anonymously sent select clips to the park superintendent, carefully timing the delivery to coincide with a board meeting discussing the ongoing investigation. The effect was immediate and explosive. Whispers of corruption and betrayal spread through the park's administrative offices like a virus. Through it all, Ethan maintained his composure, playing the role of the concerned veteran ranger to perfection. But beneath the calm exterior, a storm raged. Each move against Jack was a twist of the knife, a small measure of revenge for the betrayal that had shattered his life. Yet, even as he orchestrated Jack's downfall, Ethan found himself grappling with unexpected emotions. There was satisfaction, yes, but also a deep, gnawing sadness. This was a man he had once called his best friend, a man he had trusted with his life during countless backcountry expeditions. In quieter moments, usually late at night, when the weight of his actions pressed down on him, Ethan wondered if he had gone too far. But then he would remember the look on Vanessa's face at the anniversary dinner, the casual way Jack had tried to deny the affair, and his resolve would harden once more. As the pressure mounted on Jack and Vanessa, Ethan made sure to keep his children informed of the truth about their mother's affair. He encouraged them to maintain relationships with Vanessa despite his own feelings. This measured response earned him sympathy among family and friends, creating a stark contrast with Vanessa and Jack's increasingly erratic behavior. One evening, Lily visited him at his cabin. As they sat on the small porch, watching the sunset behind the mountains, she turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Dad," she said softly, "I do not know how you are doing this, how you can be so calm about everything." Ethan sighed, feeling the weight of his actions pressing down on him. "I am not calm, sweetheart. Not on the inside. But this park, it has been my life's work. I cannot let personal feelings get in the way of protecting it." Lily nodded, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "We are all behind you, Dad. No matter what happens." As she left, Ethan felt a mixture of pride and guilt wash over him. His children's support meant everything to him, but he could not help wondering, would they still stand by him if they knew the full extent of his manipulations? While plotting his revenge, Ethan took a step back, his hand now firmly gripping his radio. "Jack, I think you need to take a breath. You are not making any sense. If you are struggling, there are resources available. Do not patronize me." Jack shouted, his voice echoing through the trees. A flock of birds took flight, startled by the sudden outburst. "You think you can just destroy my life, my career, and get away with it?" Jack seethed. "I will expose you, Ethan. I will tell everyone what you have been up to." Ethan's voice remained steady, but a new edge crept into his tone. "Think carefully about what you are saying, Jack. You are the head of park security, making unfounded accusations against a senior ranger. How do you think that is going to look, especially with the ongoing investigation?" The color drained from Jack's face as the implications of Ethan's words sank in. In his desperate attempt to confront Ethan, he had only succeeded in making himself appear more unstable, more guilty. Ethan pressed his advantage. "Look, Jack, I do not know what is going on with you, but this behavior, it is concerning. Is there something you want to tell me? Something about the recent security breaches, perhaps?" Jack's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He took a stumbling step backward, suddenly looking very small against the vast wilderness behind him. I need to go," Jack mumbled, turning abruptly and disappearing into the trees. Ethan watched him go, a complex mix of emotions swirling in his chest. Part of him wanted to call out, to end the charade and confront Jack openly about his betrayal. But the larger part, the part hardened by months of pain and plotting, remained silent. As he resumed his patrol, Ethan's mind was already racing ahead, anticipating Jack's next move. The confrontation had gone better than he could have hoped. Jack's erratic behavior would only serve to further discredit him in the eyes of park administration. But Ethan knew he could not afford to get complacent. Jack was desperate now, and desperate men were dangerous. He would need to be more vigilant than ever in the coming days. Little did Ethan know, another confrontation was brewing, one that would test his resolve in ways he had not anticipated. Several days after his encounter with Jack, Ethan returned to his cabin after a long day of patrols to find an unexpected visitor waiting for him. Vanessa stood on the small porch, her once confident posture now hunched and uncertain. "Ethan," she said softly as he approached. "Can we talk?" For a moment, Ethan considered turning around and walking away. But curiosity, and perhaps a lingering ember of the love they had once shared, made him nod and gesture for her to enter. Inside, Vanessa's eyes darted around, taking in the stark evidence of Ethan's new solitary life. A single cot, a small desk covered in maps and reports, a kitchenette with only one plate and mug. It was a far cry from the comfortable home they had shared for over 2 decades. "What do you want, Vanessa?" Ethan asked, his voice carefully neutral. Vanessa took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. I need to explain. To apologize," she said. "What I did, what we did, it was unforgivable. But, Ethan, you have to believe me. I never meant for any of this to happen." Ethan's laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. "Never meant for it to happen?" He scoffed. "You had an affair with my best friend for months, Vanessa. That does not just happen." I know, Vanessa said, her voice cracking. "But things between us, they had been so distant for so long." Jack was there. He listened. "He made me feel stopped." Ethan cut her off, his voice like ice. "I do not want to hear about how Jack made you feel. What I want to know is how you could betray not just me, but everything we built here. Did this park mean nothing to you? Vanessa's eyes widened. Of course, it did. It still does, Ethan. That is part of why I am here. The things that are happening, the investigation. Jack is falling apart. He is talking about fleeing, about exposing some sort of conspiracy. I am worried he might do something drastic. Ethan's face remained impassive, but internally he felt a surge of triumph. His plan was working even better than he had anticipated, but he could not let Vanessa see that. And what do you expect me to do about it? He asked coldly. I do not know, Vanessa admitted. But Ethan, despite everything, I know you. You are a good man. You would not want to see the park suffer because of our mistakes. For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then, slowly, he walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. From it, he extracted a series of photographs. Do you recognize these locations, Vanessa? He asked, spreading the photos on the desk. Vanessa leaned in, her face paling as she recognized the secluded spots where she and Jack had met for their clandestine encounters. These areas, Ethan continued, his voice tight with controlled anger, are restricted zones. Critical habitats for endangered species. And you too. You trampled through them like they were your private love nest. Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes as the full impact of their actions hit her. Ethan, we did not know. We never meant to what? Ethan interrupted. To destroy delicate ecosystems? To potentially disrupt the mating patterns of species on the brink of extinction? To compromise years of conservation work? Vanessa sank into a chair, her head in her hands. Oh God, what have we done? Ethan watched her, feeling a mix of satisfaction and an unexpected pang of sympathy. But he squashed it down ruthlessly. There was no room for sympathy in his plan. I think you should leave now, Vanessa, he said quietly. And I think you need to take a long, hard look at the choices you have made, not just in our marriage, but in your commitment to this park and everything it stands for. As Vanessa stumbled out of the cabin, her face streaked with tears, Ethan turned to the window. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. It was a reminder of why he had dedicated his life to this place, why he was willing to go to such lengths to protect it. But as the last rays of sunlight faded, leaving him alone in the growing darkness, Ethan could not help but wonder about the cost of his revenge. The wilderness he loved so dearly was teaching him a harsh lesson. In nature, every action has consequences, often far-reaching and unpredictable. With a heavy sigh, Ethan turned back to his desk, his eyes falling on the surveillance equipment that had become both his weapon and his burden. He knew the next steps in his plan would be crucial. The information he had gathered over the past weeks was damning, not just for Jack and Vanessa, but for the entire park security system. Ethan reached for his encrypted laptop, his fingers flying over the keys as he compiled the evidence he had collected. Wildlife protection agencies would be very interested in the rare plant and animal smuggling operation he had uncovered. But he had to be careful to keep his own involvement hidden. As he worked, a plan began to form in his mind. Jack's ex-wife, Sarah, a former park ranger who had left under mysterious circumstances, could be a valuable asset. Ethan had always suspected there was more to her departure than the official story of personal reasons. With a few discreet phone calls and carefully worded emails, Ethan set up a seemingly chance encounter between Sarah and Vanessa. The next day, he watched from a distance as Sarah and Vanessa met at the Old Faithful Inn's coffee shop. Even from afar, he could see the shock and disbelief on Vanessa's face as Sarah spoke, her animated gestures telling a story that was clearly causing Vanessa distress. As the women parted ways, Vanessa stumbling slightly as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted, Ethan felt a twinge of what might have been guilt. But he quickly suppressed it. This was necessary, he told himself. For the park. For justice. Ethan crept closer. As he drew near, he recognized the voices Jack and Vanessa. They were arguing in hushed but heated tones. We have to do something, Jack, Vanessa hissed. Ethan is destroying us. He knows everything. Jack's response was low and angry. Do you not think I know that? But we cannot just run. We need a plan. Ethan froze, his heart pounding. He had not anticipated this. Jack and Vanessa working together against him. As he listened, their plan began to take shape, and a chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran down his spine. They were going to paint him as unstable, a danger to himself and others. Jack spoke of using his access to personnel files to dig up any past incidents they could exploit. Vanessa, her voice trembling with a mixture of guilt and determination, talked about reaching out to their children, spinning a tale of emotional neglect and manipulation. As their voices faded into the distance, Ethan remained rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. He had underestimated them, underestimated the lengths they would go to protect themselves. Over the next few days, Ethan began to feel the effects of their counterattack. Whispers followed him as he walked through the ranger station. Colleagues who had once greeted him warmly now averted their eyes. He overheard snippets of conversations, murmurs about mental health concerns, about erratic behavior. The children he had tried so hard to shield from the worst of the scandal began to act differently around him. His youngest, Tom, called one evening, his voice hesitant and strained. "Dad," he said, "Mama's been saying some things about you, about how you have been acting. Is everything okay?" Ethan's throat tightened. "Everything is fine, son," he said, forcing a steady tone. "Your mother, she is going through a lot right now. Try not to worry, okay?" But even as he spoke the words, Ethan knew that nothing was fine. The carefully constructed plan he had set in motion was spiraling out of control. The final blow came in the form of a certified letter. Jack and Vanessa had hired an aggressive lawyer to counter Ethan's divorce proceedings. The document was filled with allegations, claims of mental instability, abuse of power, baseless accusations. They were aiming not just to discredit him, but to potentially take control of his pension and his share of their assets. Ethan sat at his small desk, the letter crumpled in his fist, as the full weight of his actions came crashing down on him. He had set out to protect the park, to seek justice for the betrayal he had suffered. But in doing so, had he become the very thing he despised? As the sun set over the mountains, casting long shadows across his cabin, Ethan made a decision. He could not fight fire with fire any longer. If he was going to salvage anything from this mess, his reputation, his relationship with his children, his very sense of self, he needed to find another way. But before he could act on this revelation, a park-wide emergency alarm blared through the night. A massive wildfire had broken out in a remote section of Yellowstone, threatening not just the ecosystem but potentially exposing evidence of Jack's smuggling operation. As Ethan grabbed his gear and rushed out to join the firefighting efforts, he realized that nature, in its implacable way, had taken control of the situation. The wilderness he had sought to protect would now be the stage for the final act of this drama. The irony was not lost on him as he climbed into a park vehicle, siren wailing. In his quest for revenge, he had forgotten the most fundamental lesson Yellowstone had taught him. In nature, balance always reasserts itself, often in the most unexpected and violent ways. As he sped toward the growing inferno, Ethan knew that whatever happened next would be beyond his control. The sky above Yellowstone was an angry bruise of purple and orange, the setting sun barely visible through the thick smoke that choked the air. Ethan Sawyer stood at the edge of a cliff, his eyes scanning the horizon, where flames licked at the treetops like hungry demons. The wildfire had started small, a single lightning strike in a remote corner of the park, but drought conditions had turned it into a raging inferno, threatening to consume everything in its path. Ethan's radio crackled to life. "All units, this is dispatch. The fire has jumped the fire break at Sector 7. I repeat, the fire has jumped the fire break. All personnel to evacuation points immediately." Ethan grabbed the radio, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "This is Ranger Sawyer. I am taking command of the firefighting efforts in the northern quadrant. All available units converge on my location." As he spoke, Ethan's mind raced. The northern quadrant. That was where Jack had hidden his largest cache of smuggled goods. The evidence that could bring down Jack's entire operation was now directly in the fire's path. For a brief moment, Ethan considered letting it burn. It would be so easy. Nature itself seemed to be offering him the perfect solution, a way to destroy the evidence of Jack's crimes without getting his own hands dirty. But as quickly as the thought came, he pushed it away. That was not who he was. That was not what the park stood for. "Dispatch, this is Sawyer," he said into the radio. "I need a team for a high-risk extraction in Sector 9. We have sensitive materials that need to be secured." "Negative, Ranger Sawyer," came the reply. "Sector 9 is too hot. We cannot risk sending anyone in there." Ethan gritted his teeth. "Then I will go myself. Just have a backup team ready at the extraction point." Before anyone could argue, Ethan was moving. He raced down the rocky slope toward his jeep, the heat of the approaching fire already making sweat bead on his forehead. As he drove towards Sector 9, weaving through smoke-filled valleys and dodging falling embers. Ethan could not help but reflect on the irony of his situation. He had spent months meticulously planning Jack's downfall, and now, here he was, risking his life to preserve the very evidence he had worked so hard to uncover. The jeep skidded to a halt at the edge of a small clearing. Through the thick smoke, Ethan could just make out the outline of a small cabin, Jack's hidden storage site. He pulled a bandana over his face and grabbed his emergency pack before plunging into the smoky haze. Inside the cabin, the heat was oppressive. Ethan moved quickly, gathering up rare plant specimens and carefully labeled boxes of animal products. Each item represented a betrayal of the park, of their friendship, of everything Ethan held dear. But they were also irreplaceable, vital for both the ongoing investigation and the park's research efforts. A distant rumble caught his attention. The fire was getting closer. Ethan redoubled his efforts, sweat stinging his eyes as he loaded the last of the evidence into his pack. Just as he was about to leave, a glint of metal caught his eye. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard was a waterproof case. Ethan pried it open. Inside was a detailed ledger, names, dates, amounts. The smoking gun he had been searching for all along. Clutching the ledger to his chest, Ethan stumbled out of the cabin. The world outside had transformed into a hellscape of smoke and flame. He could barely see the jeep through the thick haze. Suddenly, his radio crackled to life. "Mayday, mayday. This is Jack Hawthorne. I am trapped in Coyote Canyon. The fire, it is everywhere. If anyone can hear this, help." Ethan froze. Coyote Canyon was less than a mile from his current position. He looked down at the ledger in his hands, then back toward the direction of Jack's distress call. The choice before him was clear: secure the evidence and ensure Jack's downfall, or risk everything to save the man who had betrayed him. For a long moment, Ethan stood there, the heat of the approaching fire pressing in on all sides. Then, with a muttered curse, he shoved the ledger into his pack and turned toward the flames. Coyote Canyon. "Hang on, Jack," Ethan growled into the radio. "I am coming." The drive to Coyote Canyon was a nightmare of smoke and flames. Twice, Ethan had to swerve to avoid falling trees, the jeep's tires spinning in the loose ash. As he neared the canyon, he saw why Jack had become trapped. The fire had created a perfect storm, with the wind funneling the flames into a roaring inferno that had cut off all escape routes. Ethan parked the jeep at the canyon's edge and grabbed his emergency gear. As he rappelled down into the smoke-filled canyon, he could hear Jack's desperate cries for help. "Jack," Ethan shouted. "Where are you?" A weak cough answered him. "Here. I am over here." Ethan found Jack huddled against a rock face, his clothes singed and his face streaked with soot. For a moment, their eyes met, and Ethan saw a flicker of confusion in Jack's gaze, quickly replaced by desperate hope. "Ethan," Jack croaked. "What are you doing here?" "Saving your ass, apparently," Ethan grunted as he helped Jack to his feet. "Can you climb?" Jack nodded weakly, and together they began the arduous ascent out of the canyon. The heat was intense, the smoke so thick it was hard to breathe. Ethan's muscles screamed with the effort of supporting both his own weight and Jack's. Just as they neared the top, a loud crack split the air. Ethan looked up to see a massive pine tree, its trunk engulfed in flames, toppling toward them. Without thinking, he shoved Jack the final few feet to safety before diving to the side. The tree crashed down, missing Ethan by inches. As he lay there, gasping for breath in the superheated air, he heard the whump-whump-whump of helicopter blades. A spotlight cut through the smoke, illuminating the scene as the rescue team rappelled down to secure them. Ethan caught Jack's eye once more. There was something there, gratitude, certainly, but also shame. A dawning realization of the magnitude of his own actions. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them away from the inferno below. As they soared over the burning landscape, Ethan looked down at the park he had sworn to protect. The fire raged on, unstoppable and indifferent to the human drama it had ignited. But even in the midst of destruction, Ethan could see the promise of renewal. Fire was a natural part of the forest's life cycle, clearing away the old to make way for new growth. As the adrenaline of the rescue faded, Ethan felt a deep weariness settle into his bones. He had saved Jack, yes, but at what cost? The evidence in his pack weighed heavily, a reminder that the real battle was far from over. The helicopter touched down at the firefighters' base camp, and Ethan stumbled out, still supporting the semi-conscious Jack. As medical personnel rushed to attend to them, Ethan caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Vanessa stood at the edge of the landing zone, her eyes wide with shock and fear. For a moment, their gazes locked. Ethan saw a swirl of emotions in her eyes: relief, guilt, confusion. But before either of them could speak, he was whisked away by the medical team, leaving Vanessa standing alone in the chaos of the base camp. As he was led to a medical tent, Ethan's mind was already racing ahead. The fire had changed everything, bringing long-simmering conflicts to a boil. But it had also offered a chance for redemption for himself, for Jack, for the park itself. The question was, would they seize it? The days following the dramatic rescue blurred together in a haze of smoke, exhaustion, and relentless questioning. Ethan found himself at the center of a storm of attention, hailed as a hero by some and viewed with suspicion by others. The evidence he had recovered from Jack's hidden cache had been turned over to federal investigators, setting off a chain reaction that sent shockwaves through the park's administration. Jack, still recovering from smoke inhalation and minor burns, was arrested by federal agents the moment he was released from medical care. Ethan watched from a distance as Jack was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of defeat. The charges were severe: endangerment, illegal wildlife trafficking, abuse of his official position. The man Ethan had once called his best friend now faced years in federal prison. As the dust began to settle, Ethan found himself standing at the edge of the firefighters' base camp, staring out at the scorched landscape. The fire had been contained, but its effects would be felt for years to come. Much like the aftermath of Jack and Vanessa's betrayal, Ethan mused. A familiar voice broke into his thoughts. Ethan. He turned to see Vanessa standing there, her eyes red-rimmed, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled. For a moment, Ethan was transported back to their anniversary dinner, when he had first confronted her about the affair. But now, instead of anger, he felt only a deep, aching weariness. "What do you want, Vanessa?" he asked, his voice hoarse from days of breathing smoke-filled air. She took a hesitant step forward. I wanted to thank you for saving Jack, and to apologize. For everything." Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "Apologize? No? After everything that has happened?" Vanessa flinched at his tone but pressed on. "I know it is too late. I know I have destroyed everything we had. But, Ethan, seeing you risk your life like that, it made me realize how far we have all fallen. How far I have fallen." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. He looked out at the blackened trees, the ash-covered ground. Somewhere out there, new life was already beginning to stir, seeds awakening in soil enriched by the fire's destruction. "You know," he said finally, "there is a type of pine cone that only opens and releases its seeds after a fire. The heat cracks it open, and the ash provides nutrients for the new seedlings. Nature's way of turning destruction into renewal." He turned back to Vanessa, his eyes tired but clear. "I saved Jack because it was the right thing to do. Because, despite everything, I am still the man you married. The man who swore to protect this park and everyone in it. But, Vanessa, that does not change what happened between us." Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes. "I know. I do not expect forgiveness, Ethan. I needed you to know that I understand now. The magnitude of what I have done. Not just to you, but to the park, to our family." Ethan nodded slowly. "Understanding is a start. But trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. You and Jack, you did not just betray me. You betrayed everything this park stands for. Everything we worked for all these years." Vanessa wiped at her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now," Ethan sighed, "now we face the consequences of our actions. All of us." As if on cue, a park administrator approached. "Ranger Sawyer, the superintendent would like to see you in her office." Ethan nodded, then turned back to Vanessa. "I need to go. Take care of yourself, Vanessa. And I hope you find a way to make things right with yourself, if no one else." As he walked away, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The conversation had not brought closure, exactly. But it had opened a door. To what? He was not sure yet. The superintendent's office was a flurry of activity when Ethan arrived. Phones were ringing off the hook, harried staff members rushed back and forth with stacks of reports, and in the midst of it all sat Superintendent Harriet Chun. Her usually immaculate desk was covered in maps and satellite images of the fire damage. "Ah, Ranger Sawyer," she said, gesturing for Ethan to take a seat. "How are you holding up?" Ethan sank into the chair, suddenly aware of every ache in his body. "I have been better, ma'am," he admitted, "but I am ready to get back to work." Harriet nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "That is good to hear, because I have a proposition for you." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Ethan, your actions during this crisis have been nothing short of exemplary. which is why I would like to offer you the position of Chief Ranger. For the first time in months, the air was finally clear of smoke. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling a glimmer of hope. The path ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it. After all, he mused, looking out at the scarred yet healing landscape. If Yellowstone could renew itself after a devastating fire, so could he. 1 year had passed since the wildfire that had changed everything. Ethan Sawyer stood at the summit of Mount Washburn, Yellowstone's highest peak, surveying the landscape below. The scars of the fire were still visible, but they were softened now by the vibrant green of new growth. Nature, in its infinite wisdom, had already begun the process of renewal. Ethan took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the crisp mountain air. So much had changed in the past year, both in the park and in his own life. As Chief Ranger, he had implemented sweeping changes to the park's conservation policies and ethical training programs. It had not been easy, change never was, but he could already see the positive impact. His radio crackled to life, breaking the mountain silence. "Chief Sawyer, this is dispatch. Just got word from the warden. Jack Hawthorne's sentencing is complete. 15 years in federal prison." Ethan closed his eyes, letting the news wash over him. "Copy that, dispatch. Thanks for the update. 15 years. It seemed both too much and not enough for the damage Jack had done. But as Ethan opened his eyes and looked out over the recovering landscape, he realized that the sentence brought with it a sense of closure. The betrayal that had shattered his world a year ago now felt distant. Not forgotten, certainly, but no longer the raw, aching wound it had once been. As if on cue, Ethan felt his satellite phone vibrate in his pocket. He pulled it out to find a new email notification. The sender's name made his heart skip a beat. Vanessa. For a moment, Ethan's finger hovered over the delete button. But curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, made him open the message instead. "Dear Ethan, I hope this email finds you well. I have been following the news about Yellowstone, about all the positive changes you have been making as Chief Ranger. I am proud of you, even though I know I have no right to be. I am writing because I need you to know how deeply I regret my actions. Not just the affair, but the way I lost sight of what was truly important. Our family, the park, the principles we once shared. I have spent this past year trying to understand how I could have strayed so far from the person I thought I was. I am working for a small newspaper now, in a city far from Yellowstone. It is not glamorous, but it is honest work. More importantly, it is giving me a chance to use my photography skills to shed light on environmental issues. I am trying, in my own small way, to make amends for the damage I have done. I do not expect forgiveness, Ethan. I know that what I did is unforgivable, but I hope that someday you might find it in your heart to remember the good times we shared, rather than just the pain of how it ended. Take care of yourself, and take care of our park. I know it is in the best possible hands with you at the helm." Vanessa. Ethan lowered the phone, his emotions a complex tangle. He looked out over the vast expanse of Yellowstone, the park that had been both the catalyst for their marriage's destruction and his own personal salvation. After a long moment, he began to type a reply. "Vanessa, thank you for your email. I am glad to hear you are finding your way forward. The past year has been one of profound change and growth, both for the park and for me personally. While I cannot offer forgiveness just yet, I can offer understanding. We all lose our way sometimes. What matters is that we find our path again. I appreciate your kind words about my work here. Yellowstone has always been more than just a job to me. It is a calling. I am grateful for the opportunity to lead it into a new era of conservation and ethical stewardship. As for our family, I want you to know that I have maintained open communication with our children about everything that has happened. They are hurting, but they are resilient. Our youngest, Tom, is doing well in college. He is considering a major in environmental science, actually. I cannot go back to what we were, Vanessa. Too much has happened. But perhaps we can move forward with a civil relationship, especially for Tom's sake. Take care." Ethan. As he hit send, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. The exchange was not a reconciliation, but it was a step toward something. Not better, perhaps, but more honest, more true to who they were now. Ethan's contemplation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps crunching on gravel. He turned to see Dr. Sierra Reeves making her way up the last stretch of the trail to the summit. Her face was flushed from the climb, her dark hair escaping from its ponytail, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "Ethan," she called out as she reached him. I have been looking all over for you. The data from our latest wolf population survey just came in, and you are not going to believe the results." Ethan could not help but smile at her enthusiasm. Over the past year, he and Sierra had worked closely together on various conservation projects. Her passion for wildlife biology and her unwavering commitment to the park's ecosystem had been a breath of fresh air in the wake of all the turmoil. "Let's hear it," he said, genuinely interested. As Sierra launched into an explanation of pack dynamics and territory expansion, Ethan found himself admiring more than just her scientific expertise. There was something about her, a warmth and integrity that resonated deeply with him. "You know," he said when she paused for breath, "I think this calls for a celebration. How about dinner at the Old Faithful Inn tonight? I hear the bison steaks are excellent this time of year." Sierra's eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled with pleasure. "I like that, Ethan. I would like that a lot." As they began the descent from Mount Washburn, walking side by side, Ethan felt a spark of something he had not experienced in a long time. Hope, not just for the park's future, but for his own. The trail wound through areas still bearing the scars of last year's fire, but everywhere, new life was sprouting. Wildflowers painted the ashen-rich soil in vibrant hues, and young saplings reached hopefully toward the sky. Ethan paused for a moment, taking in the scene. "You know," he said to Sierra, "there is a theory in fire ecology called the intermediate disturbance hypothesis. It suggests that occasional disturbances, like wildfires, can actually increase biodiversity in an ecosystem." Sierra nodded, intrigued. "By creating opportunities for new species to establish themselves, right?" "Exactly," Ethan replied. "I have been thinking lately that maybe the same principle applies to life. Sometimes, it takes a major disturbance to clear away the old growth and make room for new possibilities." He turned to Sierra, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "I have spent the past year focused on rebuilding the park, on making things right. But I am starting to realize that there might be room in my life for something new, too." Sierra's smile was warm and understanding. "New beginnings can be scary," she said softly, "but they can also be beautiful." As they resumed their hike, Ethan felt a weight he had not even realized he was carrying lift from his shoulders. The betrayal, the anger, the thirst for revenge, all of it seemed to recede, leaving behind a sense of peace and possibility. The sun was beginning to set as they reached the trailhead, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Ethan paused once more, taking in the breathtaking view. "You know," he said to Sierra, "I think I am finally ready to embrace that new beginning." As they walked toward the ranger station together, Ethan allowed himself a genuine smile. He realized that, like the park itself, he had not just survived the fire and betrayal. He had emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed to his life's purpose than ever before. The path ahead was uncharted territory, but Ethan Sawyer was ready to explore it. After all, if Yellowstone had taught him anything, it was that the most beautiful vistas often came after the most challenging climbs.